Tonight, our speaker is David Droppers, and he will report the final results of his butterfly inventory project on the Mountain Loop Highway. He's conducted this project in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and will present his results now that the fieldwork is completed. His work on this project has been in the Mount Baker Snoqualmie Forest, but has been used by foresters throughout the state. Imagine my surprise when I was volunteering in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest and the forester there explained how he was using pollinator research done further north to assess how to plant the area that we were clearing. Well, you can imagine who conducted that work that he was using. So David's work has been used by foresters throughout the state. So he's been an astonishing volunteer for U.S. Forest Service on this project for 8 years. And we are also fortunate that he is such a good friend of WBA and is here with us tonight to tell us about it. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Paulette. As far as being good friends, it's good to see so many good friends attending. This is kind of one of the things I'm looking forward to now that the project is finally done. I can see more of you in the field this upcoming season. As far as sharing results, think of these as preliminary results. I haven't run any hard numbers. This is graphs. We're going to look at some graphs. We're going to kind of explore some of them. And I'm going to give you more than just graphs. I'm not going to overwhelm you with numbers. We are going to look at some pretty pictures and good stories and all that kind of stuff as well. But when I say it's done, not the entire project, I still plan on publishing, but the field work is finally done. And someone asked me if I can sum it up in one sentence, what would it be? I had to think about it. But the one thing I can only think of was, there we go, activate the slide, was what a way to spend 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not my intention. My intention when I started this project was not to spend 8 years doing it, but that's what it ended up doing with 11 trails to survey to a level I was satisfied with. This is the top of Mount Pew, one of the best butterfly sites on the Mountain Loop Highway and my personal favorite. Ditto, same person said, if I could only hike one hike for the rest of my life, what would it be? And Mount Pew is definitely the one I would hike for the rest of my life because look at that view. But we'll get back to Mount Pew a little later. So I guess onward, we'll just jump right into it. Now, for those of you who have seen my multiple presentations on this product, and maybe you're thankful that, oh God, this is the last one. Don't worry, I'm working on other projects I can bore you to tears with. So it all started with a happenstance encounter on the Monte Cristo Trail where on a WABA trip, we discovered a very late, July 19th, Johnson's hair streak puddling along the riverside. And 2008 was a late butterfly season, hence the really late date of this butterfly. I just kind of find just once again, little musings here and there. I kind of find the serendipity of all this amazing. Had that late butterfly season not happened, this project probably would have never, I'm not even going to say probably, it would not have happened had I not had this chance encounter with this butterfly. That chance encounter would not have happened without that late season. So an event in 2008 put all of this into motion. So I just kind of one of those things you think about. What would I be doing if that had not happened? But this ended up leading me getting hired for a season with the Forest Service, trying to find more of them in 2009. They also asked me to start recording. Hey, can you keep an eye out and tell us what other butterflies there are? We have no money to hire any taxonomists to figure out what is on our lands. And then, of course, that led me to talking with Pelham, and we looked at the records, and Snohomish County in general is just a very poorly sampled area for reasons you are not surprised at. It's dark, it's cold, it's wet. Butterflies just tend not to like it. But of course, I see a big empty spot on the map and go, well, how much is actually not there? Or is it just that we're not looking? Turns out we are just not looking. So just to summarize, this was kind of so I have 127 what I would call official surveys, 139 total surveys. These would be like days I'd get out on the highway. Maybe I wasn't on one of the official trails. Maybe I was on another trail in the area. You can see that I really went gung-ho in 2022 and 2023. You might notice that 2019 is missing. That was the year I moved to Walla Walla to get my electrician certification. But kind of just in general, so that I've been told I should calculate total miles hiked, total elevation gained, all that kind of stuff, and I really don't want to because my right knee will yell at me. As far as how it breaks down, as far as surveys by month, you say I really concentrated July and August, and it might lead some of you to get a little skeptical when then I show you the diversity on the Mountain Loop Highway by month. You go, hold on a second, there's a correlation there. So maybe if you did more surveys May and April, how do we know that species diversity is actually that low in April and May? Most of my survey areas are under snow at that time. Hence, there's just more surveys that can be done in July and August than can be done in May. Mount Dickerman's still under 5 feet of snow in May. So the butterflies flying earlier in the season are just going to be less. I'm not going to get my high elevation species, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's just the challenge of landing a sunny day off in April and May when you have a full-time work schedule. So there's limitations there as well. But some trends kind of emerge that I find surprising, where mid-July has the highest species richness, and yet you look at mid-July as far as number of surveys in that month, and it's actually one of the lower ones in the summer. So, does that reflect that mid-July is actually the peak, or given that it had a few less surveys than the others? Just little things to dig in here and there. But this is kind of the graph I was really working toward. So in blue is just the species richness.
Well, we don't see your screen, David.
What's that?
We don't see your screen.
Do you see that?
We don't see your screen, no.
I see his screen.
I can see his screen.
I see it too.
I see it.
Paulette, you've got problems with audio and
man,
screens
I got
now.
problems at my end for sure. Wow.
Well, I'm happy to hear everyone else can see it, and Paulette, you can
there
watch
we
the
go.
recording.
I had to, so Zoom did an update and it's all confusing now. So okay.
Of course.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, my bad. Thank you.
Technology is great until it isn't.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you see it now, Paulette?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Wonderful. So this is kind of the figure I was working toward all this time, although I didn't start out the project with this figure in mind. This was definitely an evolving one, which kind of meant I had to go back to some of the original trails and do them right. So in blue is just the species richness, as far as just the plain number of species I saw there. But like most ecologists, we want to incorporate abundance into there too. So I made this thing. It's very coarse. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. It was just a really crude way of incorporating abundance, just so I can kind of say, okay, which trail has more butterflies than others? And I just called it a diversity abundance index. So it's just given a relative abundance, a species got a score on each trail from 1 to 5, 1 being I only saw like 1 or 2 of them, to 5 being, super abundant. I saw over 100 of them. And then those scores just added together for each species to give the DA index. And then the RADA index, I call it a resident adjusted, meaning I just took the migrants out, because you'll have outbreak years. We just talked about outbreaks. If I do a survey on 2 trails on 1 year, and that year happens to be a painted lady outbreak, well, guess what? They're probably on every trail. And then the next year they drop in numbers and I don't see any on the Mountain Loop Highway, and that trail is going to look like it has no painted ladies, when in fact it probably did last year. So I tried to account for that with the resident adjusted diversity abundance index. But all of these, I've run the correlation test. They're all highly correlated, so it's like they're pretty predictive of each other, so not too surprising there. And just to kind of give you an idea of this is just an index. This is an oversimplified demonstration of this. So you'll have 2 different sites. Both of them have 10 species, but you can see site 1 just has only 1 of each species there. It's pretty butterfly poor, whereas site 2, you can see there's more typical. Certain species abound there, certain species don't. But you get an idea that that site 2 is definitely more butterfly rich, even though the richness is the same. Kind of case in point, Walt Bailey you can see here, has a higher species richness. These are ordered in ascending species richness, but you see that the DA index is higher for Beaver Lake than it is for Walt Bailey. So while Walt Bailey, you can find more butterfly species there, Beaver Lake has more butterflies. That was kind of the idea. But you see, that's the only one that kind of bucks the trend there. Otherwise, everyone else pretty much ascends with diversity, with abundance as you increase diversity. But so let's explore this a little bit. So these are my 11 trails. And can we find any predictors here? Once again, I haven't come up with any, I haven't run any real statistical tests. I'm not sure if I will. We'll kind of explore this over time. Now that the field work's done, I'm kind of just really letting this absorb. But these are some of the things I've started thinking about. So here are all my north-facing sites. You see, they're kind of clustered toward the bottom of the world. The rest are considered south-facing. So you can definitely see a split here. North-facing is going to be, generally has much lower species richness than the south-facing sites, but not always. You can see Big Four ice caves contends with some, but then like Independence North Lakes, Beaver Lake are south-facing. So that can't be the whole story. So what else could there be? Well, we think about the different habitats along the Mountain Loop Highway. You start pretty much down in either riparian or coniferous forests. And that's one habitat. But then as you ascend, you get into subalpine meadows, heather and huckleberry meadows, et cetera, et cetera. So could elevation change indicates be a predictive of species richness? You would expect as you go through different habitats. That doesn't really hold up as well, because you see this, you have little elevation change that kind of spans the graphs, the different sites here. Some places with little elevation change has fewer butterflies, but some are up there in the top, one's in the top 3. Moderate elevation change, we're changing more elevation. Well, those actually are on the lower end. Whereas great elevation change, you have a lot of elevation change that you're going through. Those are clustered at the higher end, so that does make sense. So, but what's going on here? How do we explain maybe North Fork, Sauk River, and Monte Cristo being among the top 5 here? Well, these two actually have access to higher elevation, so the hiker may not be ascending a bunch of elevation change, but the butterflies might. So here's a satellite image of, you can kind of see the faint trail down there, the North Fork Sauk River Trail. And you, as the hiker, are only gaining 1,000 feet of elevation in 6 miles. I mean, if you're in decent shape, it can go pretty fast. But there is an unbroken corridor up to the subalpine meadows. And this was the only spot I encountered 2 field crescents in the entire study area, in the entire duration of the study. So what I think is happening is you have high elevation species that descend. Maybe they've woken up a bit early. They don't have, their nectar sources haven't progressed, so they get to come down. Males will puddle. They'll find flowers in bloom, and then they can go back up. So maybe that helps explain the access to high. The butterflies have more access to great elevation change than the others in this area. Whereas if you look at Beaver Lake down here, Beaver Lake is a riparian area, riparian trail along the Sauk River. There is no avalanche slope that leads up to high elevation sites. But so what's the other one? The other one is Big Four ice caves. We'll come back to this one later. But so going back to the North Fork Sauk River, at the terminus of this trail, you are, I think, only 2 miles away from Chelan County. So you're pretty far east. And that might help explain some of the butterflies, as far as some of them maybe trickling over into the east side, into the west side. This was my one site where I found, at least definitely, the Asher's azure, the Celestrina asheri, that was recently described. So here are 3 specimens. The outer 2, the male and the female, Caitlin says, oh yeah, those are definitely asheri. The middle one I collected because it has the dark discal marks on the hind wing, on the ventral hind wing. But the top, she says, that's noticeably, I don't know if you call it a deeper blue or more violet blue, not quite so much of a shiny blue. So she says, there might be some hanky-panky between some species there. But as far as North Fork Sauk River goes, I mean, that is just some magical old growth. It takes a little bit of time to get back there, a bit of a bumpy road, but it is a very popular area as far as an access to the PCT up to Glacier Peak. And it is in those avalanche chutes that break through the forest that you see a lot of the butterflies. And some of those forest butterflies filter into there for all those nectar sources. Now, what does happen later in the season, because this is a popular access area, and there are an awful lot of stinging nettles along this area, crews do come in and weed whack around the trail, just 3 feet around the trail. But remember, I saw 29 species of butterflies along this trail, so they're just fine with it. They're probably fairly adapted to that routine change. There are low species of nectar sources, and then you get, 3 feet outside the trail, the nectar sources are all there later in the season. And there are a few pack animals that come up here, and the commas certainly did not mind puddling at all the horse urine on that trail. So they did not, they seem to like all the openness down there anyway. Probably more satyr and green commas than I've ever seen at that spot. They definitely earn their super abundance there. But so what else did I record in this study? So I was looking at nectar sources. Forest Service was primarily interested in 3 things. They want to know who was there, how abundant they were, and what they were using, because they have these dreams one day that if funding ever returns, not looking good, that they would love to do some pollinator restoration work, but they lament, we don't have a starting point. We wouldn't know if our restoration would do anything, and we wouldn't even know what to plant. And so this is what I was kind of looking for. I didn't do any true resource selection studies. There, I think there's a better word for it, but I didn't know if they were really selecting anything or not. But this kind of gives us a start. So someone who's thinking, well, does the Clodius parnassian really like valerian, or are they just using it because it's a really abundant flower? So this might give us some starts. But you can see maybe margin whites, Clodius parnassians. Looks like they don't really care. They got a lot of different things that they use, maybe some more than others. But, if you're looking at margin whites, there's a lot of miner's lettuce in those woods. So they're probably just utilizing because it's just abundant. Same with valerian and Clodius parnassians. But then you move on to something like silvery blues. Now, granted, this pie chart is based off of 10 nectar records I got for silvery blues. But you can see, hey, this gives us a hint. Maybe valerian is something that they actually do select for, but more records would be needed. Not all of my butterflies I did this pie chart for, because I wanted at least 10 nectar records. You can imagine having 2 and thinking, wow, they really like this flower, or you just haven't seen it that much. So as far as the nectar sources, I collected 76 different nectar sources over the 8 years, 784 total nectar records. And you can see there's 7 species that account for 60% of those nectar records. Asters, valerian, pearly everlasting, fleabane, bistort. It's a little embarrassing. I call it yellow composites because there's so many different species. My skills are not there yet to distinguish who's who. I don't want to call them all dandelions because I know they're not all dandelions, but there's hawksbeard, crepsis, maybe that is hawksbeard, but I'm just not there yet. And I'm wondering, do the butterflies care? Or is it just yellow composite as a yellow composite? So there might be some hidden preferences in there that I'm not seeing and I'm not recording, but that's for a botanist to figure out. And then we got arnica. So those 7 made up for 60% of our nectar records. So those look pretty important. Or once again, maybe it's just because they're widespread. But just because I haven't done selected resource selection studies or tests doesn't mean that I can't say anything. I can't say anything about these flowers. So there are some that I can confidently say they do not like. And there are some things I can look at where it's like, okay, this is better than we thought. So one of my big things I always harp on, again, on my little soapbox, is non-native does not mean bad. So there's oxeye daisy. I probably should have included some genuses in here. But so there's oxeye daisy. It's a non-native. It's pretty much all over low elevations. And the butterflies really do like it. Whereas we have native species like heather Oh man, about 8 records I've recorded of butterflies on heather. And if you've been up to subalpine meadows, heather's everywhere. So they really do not seem to like heather. So here's some cedar hair streaks. There was one day I was with Jerry Austin, and we just found every one of these flower heads had at least one butterfly, if not two. Although I can see one that definitely doesn't. But they definitely seem to prefer the oxeye daisy over the much more abundant white clover that was alongside with them on the road. Although, of course, they were on that too. But they definitely seem to be showing a preference for that one. So all kinds of little things that this data can hint at for further study. Whereas here's my photo of butterflies on heather. Nothing. No, Paulette, nothing's wrong with your screen. The visits were brief. So visits were brief. Like almost like they made a mistake and they moved on. So I never got a photo of a butterfly on heather, despite the fact that heather is one of the most abundant wildflowers up there. So they really do not seem to like heather. And then I call this the number of species served. So this is the number of species I saw on each nectar source. And it's the same top 7 again. So you have asters, valerian, bistorp, pearly everlasting, fleabane, arnica, yellow composites. There's my 7. You notice the order changed up a little bit. So like pearly everlasting dropped, but that's probably because it's a later blooming wildflower. So you just have some high summer or late summer or early summer species, late spring species that just aren't flying by the time that that one blooms. So
David,
these 7.
Can I interrupt for just a moment? There's a question.
Go for it.
You see bees on heather.
Yes, I will mention that. So
Okay.
So I was asked by the Forest Service, by my supervisor of the Forest Service, if I could keep an eye out on the bumblebees, particularly so I could try to find Bombus occidentalis, the western bumblebee, because it has declined so severely. I never did find one, but I use this as an invitation to finally learn my bumblebees. So I did not study bumblebees in as much depth as the butterflies did, and I simply just kind of kept a list of the species I saw bumblebees on. But yes, bumblebees really do love heather. So I think heather offers a lot more pollen, which is what a bumblebee's after, over nectar, which is what the butterflies are after. And that's just a guess based on my observations. I'm sure someone who's actually studied heather more in depth would be able to either confirm or correct that. So then we go back to, so oxeye daisy has 9 species I've seen on it. Once again, oxeye daisy is kind of restricted in elevation. It doesn't get up to high elevation, so that might be why there's only 9. Whereas there's heather down at 6. So I had 8 records and 6 species using it. So a lot of them were just single uses by one individual. So man, butterflies really do not like heather. So just because I didn't do any proper resource selection analyses doesn't mean I can't say anything about these. But at the very least, I can say, kind of to Paulette's point when she said she was down in the Gifford Pinchot, there's not nothing you can take away from this. This can still say, hey, these top 7 seem to be rather important. This would be a good chance to stop. I noticed that there's a fair number of chats coming up. I don't know if they're questions or not, but we can take some of the questions.
Yeah, so there's just some discussion about the question of pollen versus nectar, which you addressed. And then Regina mentioned about that flower architecture has a lot to do with what bugs visit those plants.
Thank you, Regina and Pyle, for confirming that I'm not the only one who's bad at them. I like the damn yellow composites, kind of like, the what do they call them? Little brown jobs for all the little brown sparrows or something like that.
Okay.
Let's see. I saw someone ask, oh, am I talking red heather or white? I did see both up there. And to keep matters more simple for me, because I was recording so much data, I kind of kept things at the genus level. So as far as fleabane, I noticed 3 different species of fleabane up there. I just said Erigeron, just to keep it simple for the time being. If someone really wanted to dive into that, I could give them, I kept species data as best I could. But as far as these graphs go, these are just to the genus level. Okay, so if no other questions, I'm going to continue on. So what else did I record? I obviously kept track of flight charts. This just kind of was neat to see some of the it didn't give me any like wow and fascinating insights because it kind of confirmed what we already know. Clodius parnassian is single brooded. It margin whites are multi brooded. You can see the summer brood is a little bit larger, or at least more commonly encountered, or maybe that's a reflection of how often I was out in summer versus spring. That actually might be it. I also did keep track of, once again, I use the abundance, and this is kind of where it breaks down. So, a species got a score of 1 if they were considered rare, so 1 to 2 of them seen, a 2 for uncommon, 3 for common. Notice it's not scaled, it's not proportional, but it just kind of gave me, just as the observer, just a little bit of freedom to not concentrate so much on tallying and focus more on behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, this definitely is not perfect. I wouldn't call this scientifically sound. It was more just my convenience for someone who's kind of doing surface level work as far as all of this is concerned. Because someone mentioned, did you keep track of suitable habitat for each species? And one, I would kind of respond, I'm not sure what that means. And, one trail is going to have different amounts of suitable habitat for each species. For one species, it might be the whole trail. For another, it might just be that last few hundred meters of the trail up at the subalpine habitat. It's like, man, that's a little deeper than I really want to, get into. So just take it for what it is. It was a lazy man's way of just trying to track something, but you can kind of see here where Clodius parnassians are the most abundant, although to be honest, this wasn't the best species to demonstrate this with, because Clodius parnassians were no doubt the most common butterfly on the Mountain Loop Highway. This is Parnassian land, hands down. So, I mean, I've mentioned a few, but probably a lot of you are like, well, what butterflies are you talking about? And a lot of them do kind of reflect the general patterns in Western Washington. There's a fair number of nymphalids, a fair number of lycaenids, and then, your swallowtails, whites, and skippers were surprisingly low. I think I only found like 4 species or so on the Mountain Loop Highway, and only 1 commonly. And rather than bore you, we'll cover some of the species, maybe some of the more notable ones a little bit later on, but I don't want to bore you with just reading off a list of 48 species. If you're interested in the report, I'm happy to send it to you. I'm still adding a few little graphs and charts here and there, so it's not completely done. And it is over 200 pages, so, get ready for that. But then, of course, someone asks, but did I find them all? And the answer is, I think so. When you look at my cumulative species curve, so 2016 I found, I can't remember exactly if this was, 28, 27, whatever. But you can see the cumulative species curve starts to level off. And in 2024, I found no new species than I did in 2023. But, what species might be missing? Certainly there's butterflies that are prone to eruptions. So there could be a year of mass West Coast ladies. They have a good year, and all of a sudden a few filter into the Mountain Loop Highway. I never did see one on the Mountain Loop Highway. If I kept catching all the orange sulfurs in late August and September, I might end up finding a Eriphile among them. And I tried, especially up at the high ridges with lots of sedum. I tried to find Smintheus. I tried to find my mountain Parnassian, but just they all turned up Clodius. And especially as I got east, because there are records. There's one record from the east slope of Glacier Peak. There are records of Smintheus up at Sauk Mountain, repeated records, not just one. Sauk Mountain, they're up at Mount Baker. So they can exist in mountains in Western Washington. But I tried to find one, and I just can't help myself when I'm, say, walking along these ridges and I look up at those dry ridges and go, maybe there. Maybe this is going to need some backpack or something like that. But so this was one of my sites, Round Lake. The original intention was to go down to Round Lake. I elected not to, because if you know Round Lake, you have to climb 3,800 feet just to get to the ridge, and then you have to descend another 550, which means you have to climb back out 550. And to be honest, Lost Creek Ridge, someone said, which trail are you excited to never go to again? Lost Creek Ridge. even though it looked like this. This is why I elected to not go down to Round Lake. Why would I go down when I have this in front of me? And this is kind of, a butterflyer's dream right here. And there were butterflies. So why did I continue going back to Lost Creek Ridge, even though it was a grueling climb? A few reasons. One, that view, that habitat. It was also the only trail that had a colony of Bois blues. The only one. That was one that me and Pelham were definitely scratching our heads at. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. But this is one that had me scratching my head. I thought this was going to be much more common as far as there's plenty of sites with plenty of lupin, the host plant, above 4,000 feet. And that's what the Central Cascade, that's what the Cascade subspecies, that's where it thrives. So it's weird that I just did not find any more. I just found one colony. It was common at Lost Creek Ridge. There were also Celestrina up there. There were these azures. I kind of felt like some of these were sporting some Asheri features. And this is at 5,500 feet. I'm not going to say a stone's throw because I certainly can't throw that far, but we're a stone's throw away from North Fork Sauk River where there were common Asheri there. So once again, could there be a little bit hanky-panky in here? Could Asheri genes have moved here? But this is about 5,500 feet. That's about as high as I see Celestrina on the Mountain Loop Highway. So something interesting happening there. And they were definitely centered around mountain ash up there. No dogwood up there, but mountain ash seemed to be what they were really focusing on up there. But I never did observe any oviposition. So there's Lost Creek Ridge. I mean, it definitely earned its spot at number 4. But I will say, as far as the views, as far as the habitat, as far as the species, other than the Bois blue, there was nothing that Lost Creek Ridge did that other trails couldn't do better. So, the one reason why you go to Lost Creek Ridge is the solitude. For the same reason why I go, it is a thigh burner. But let's start exploring some of the other ones. So, what about Walt Bailey? I mean, that's the only one that bucked the trend of the higher the species richness, the higher the DA index, the more abundant I saw butterflies. That was the only one that had fewer. Despite, look at that habitat. If I had to design butterfly habitat, that's what I would design. I mean, that looks like something that would be just thronged with butterflies, and it was, but very few species of them. So kind of lackluster up there. And there's a reason why. This was one of my, this was one of my north-facing sites. And so north, I mean, this is from the top of Round Mountain. This is me looking down on the habitat July 9th. It's just waking up because it's on the north side. Whereas you look at the south-facing slopes on the other mountains, they're dry. They're going. They're hopping with butterflies right now. But these guys, they're still tucked in. So the north-facing sites here just do not have the season length that butterflies need to do their thing, except for a few species. So, I mean, let's get even more grim. Let's go down to Mount Pilchuck. 15 species on Mount Pilchuck. Oh, not to mention the crowds. I mean, the view is stunning up there, but the crowds and lackluster butterflies, what was they doing up there? So this is it. I think this was June 30th or July 1st. But regardless, like you look at the other mountains on the other side, plenty of bare area where butterflies are really getting started. But north-facing sites still had lots and lots of snow. So the butterflies just couldn't do anything. And once that snow melted, you just had a lot of rock, conifers, and heather. Not really anything that butterflies do anything with. And there was next to no nectar sources. There was one little pocket at the top that had like some bistorte and a little valerian, but it was one little pocket. Most of the butterflies I saw were individuals, and most of the butterflies I saw seemed to kind of just be moving through. There are only two species that really dominated here, Mariposa coppers and Hydaspes fritillaries. The Hydaspes were pretty much only at the top. I mean, there was kind of your hill-topping males. And to Pilchuck's credit, it did have quite a few huckleberries, which is the host for Mariposa. So it does make sense that Mariposa would be just fine on Pilchuck. This was the one spot where partridge foot, this flower here, seemed popular, but I think it was only popular because it was literally the only thing available. On other trails where other nectar sources were available, this was absolutely shunned, considering how abundant it could be. Butterflies didn't like it. So I think this is just the only thing they had on the menu. But let's return to Big Four ice caves. What was up with that one? Because it was little elevation change, but it did not have a direct access to higher elevations, like with Monte Cristo or North Fork Sauk River. And Big Four ice caves is just kind of unique because it's low elevation, it's north facing, but it's so low that the melting has time the habitat has time to develop to give these species the time they need to complete their life cycles. And so, I mean, if you've never been to Big Four, you obviously need to go. I'd say late June is probably top out there as far as all the butterflies you can see. Go during a weekday, obviously, to avoid the crowds. But it's just a spectacular area that someone I brought to made some comment about she was having a hard time determining if this was real or not, if she was in the Matrix. It's so low elevation. There are Anna's blues that are there because the area mimics high elevation climates. There are Anna's blues, and they fly about a month earlier than any other Anna's blues on the Mountain Loop Highway, is how early it melts out. So Big Four ice caves was kind of its own little asterisk there. It's like, it's just its own unique situation. It's north facing, but it's low enough that they have a long enough season. And because it mimics high elevation climates, there are high elevation species that can thrive there, including plants, not just butterflies. But let's look at the elephant in the room. Mount Pew. Look at that DA index, up to 90. And there were butterflies there. So let's just take a look at the view here. So this is from the top, looking northwest. You see down in this valley here, where's my cursor? Down in this valley is Darrington. There's Whitehorse Mountain. And we're just going to look left. We're going to look to the south and we're going to turn to the east. I'm going to go slowly, but this is just as it's at the top, you're just going to turn your head and take in the splendor. And there's Glacier Peak in your face. And then we're going to turn back to the north. I stayed up there for hours. And it was kind of humbling to look at the last 8 years of your life in one view.
David, would you go through those again more slowly, please?
More slowly, done. So once again, you're looking northwest here at Whitehorse and Darrington. So Beaver Lake's down here. And now we're looking pretty much directly west. I believe that's Pilchuck out there. This should be Round Mountain. There's Big Four. North Lake is kind of tucked into here somewhere. Oh, wrong way. Now we're looking kind of more southwest. There's Mount Dickerman. Down this valley is Monte Cristo. Looking pretty much due south. Sloan Peak. I didn't climb Sloan Peak. It's a grueling climb. But if you go down this valley, that's North Fork Sauk River, gets you up to the PCT and to Chelan County. And there's east, and this ridge right in front of you is Lost Creek Ridge. So it's just kind of a little humbling to go, this was the last 8 years of my life. So I'll do that one more time. We're now looking to the right, to the west and north, and then back south and east. Just an absolutely stunning view.
And what's the river down in the valley there?
This one?
Yep, that one.
That's the North Fork Sauk.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, not North Fork. Sorry, that's just the Sauk River. Excuse me. They've combined at that point. And so there were some unique butterflies up there. One, because it has incredible elevation change. You climb more than a mile. It's not do you walk more than a mile. The elevation change is 5,200 feet. It is steep, but it's fun. It's not to be taken lightly. People have died up there, so it's not to be taken lightly at all. But there are unique species out there. I have found 2 colonies of Moss's elfin on the Mountain Loop Highway. One of my sites, North Lake, had, I think I saw one individual twice, not the same individual, different individuals, but so they're not common there. But this one, I think on at my top, I think I saw like 21 species, something like that. Sorry, not species, individuals, excuse me. So late May, this high, it's already melting out because it's a south facing site. There's sedum all over that rocky hillside. And yeah, there were Moss's elfins on this kind of lower section where you look like that's not butterfly habitat. Plenty of mosses up there. This was also the strongest colony of Arctic blues on the Mountain Loop Highway. And that meadow that we're climbing there looks rather steep, but I mean, it is steep. But that is just a wildflower bonanza up there, and the butterflies respond. Also, the strongest colony of Onychia checker spots. You can see it got overabundant. I think if I had to put a guess to it, I probably saw 50 in one day. And Onychia checker spot colonies were always a special find. They're on Mount Dickerman. They're on Round Mountain. We found one individual on the Monte Cristo Trail. Once again, probably a high elevation species utilizing an avalanche chute and descending down to river level. And they're on Mount Pilchuck commonly. And by common, I mean like the low side of common. But when I started getting into butterflies, Onychia checker spot, I just knew that as the one on the east slopes of the Cascades. That was an exotic species. And now it's incredible to drive I-5 around Everett, look at Mount Pilchuck and go, there's an Onychia checker spot colony within sight of my house. That blows my mind. I never thought I would have encountered that when I was younger and just getting into butterflies and learning all the Washington butterflies. So that was definitely a special find of the Mountain Loop Highway that I'd call the colonies uncommon. Once you've got into the colonies, they were common butterflies, especially on Mount Pew. I mean, Mount Pew's so high, it even has a small population of white-tailed ptarmigan up there. So that's really cool. It's also the only site that I found a larva of one of our rarest sphinx moths. What's it called? Yellow banded. It's just gonna be called the bumblebee sphinx, but there's a bumblebee clearwing, blah, 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 common names. This is the one photo in here that's not mine because I've never seen the adult. I did take it home. I successfully got it to pupate. I was so excited, and out popped the next spring a wasp. So maybe one of the reasons why it's so rare. Maybe it gets heavily parasitized, but oh, I was crushed that morning when it emerged. Still have the wasp though. So what else did I find out there? It wasn't just that I was finding new county records, although I certainly did, but Vidler's alpines were present in many of those meadows up there. And I was told by others that Vidler's alpines hadn't been recorded in Snohomish County for like 20 years. So I was like, that's great. And they were at many of my sites and fairly common. I wouldn't say abundant, but fairly common and consistent. What was interesting is that a lot of the sources I've looked at said that it's an avid flower visitor. Not so on the Mountain Loop Highway. I couldn't even make a pie chart. I didn't have enough nectar records. That was kind of an interesting contrast. Going back to the Johnson's hair streak, what about the Johnson's hair streak? What else did I find there? Was it the only one? I'm happy to report I have found it in 4 separate spots on the Mountain Loop Highway. You can see by the color of those dots. Certainly not common. I mean, it's just kind of whatever occurred down at eye level. There's 2 dots out here because this is all the North Fork Sauk River Trail. And this is just to kind of show readers that I didn't find them in one spot. I think for the trail, I would call them uncommon. Because I think on my highest day, I saw 4 individuals, but they're more spread out. But anyway, so I did re-find them in Monte Cristo. They're on Lake 22 after much, much searching. I did find them in the avalanche slopes on Devil's Club amongst the abundant cedar hair streaks. So that was a really fun kind of challenge there. If you want to see them, North Fork Sauk River is the place to go. Magical old growth. You look up, there's mistletoe everywhere. That is the spot for Johnson's hair streaks. And they don't seem to like a particular area. They're kind of all over. The 4 I saw were all over the place. So any spot's going to be good for you. And then I did find a surprise in early May 2023, where I did find a fresh male on the Beaver Lake Trail, which is certainly not old growth, but there is a remnant of old growth there. So it does make me wonder how small of a patch a colony can persist in. Or it could have been a wandering male that I got lucky to run into, but there is a remnant patch of old growth. Like you got 300-year-old cedars and hemlocks, but it's not a big patch. So that kind of makes me wonder, where it's like, what other little pockets of Johnson hair streaks are hanging out here? So I am happy to report that I did find 4 new colonies of this butterfly in this area that was previously they were previously unknown before this study. So that was a highlight. I did find some new hosts for for the echoazure. Pelham was very excited when I told him how much they were laying eggs on goat's beard. You can see all the little eggs in this photo here. And then I did later in the season find several larvae on it. So they seem to be using that pretty heavily. I've also seen them laying eggs on 9-bark in the same avalanche slope. Saw them laying eggs on mountain ash up at the lake itself. So even along Lake 22, there seems to be multiple hosts that they utilize. Now, I never reared these through, so who knows if mountain ash ever results in adult butterflies. At Big Four Ice Caves, I was finding them using rosy spirea pretty heavily. So they do seem to be fairly adaptable and kind of site specific based on just what thrives there. So, but this was a very cool find to show. One thing that interested me, I did notice that there was a definite size disparity at Lake 22 along the avalanche slope. There seems to be bigger echoazures and smaller ones. And I'm kind of wondering if the ones that laid their eggs on 9-bark end up getting bigger because it's just kind of bigger plants to feed on. Although, to be fair, it's not like goat's beard is lacking for inflorescences, so maybe I'm just imagining things.
So before you move on, David, before
What's
you
up?
move on, could we go back to the Johnson's hair streak?
Yes.
And a question about the dates that you saw on the Johnson's hair streak at these sites.
I can get those. So the earliest one was this one at Beaver Lake. I mean, you see how fresh that male is. I mean, that's got to be the first one, but that was early May. Most of these were in June. I believe the ones on the North Fork sock span late June, early July, but that was also 2022, and that was another late season. So I would say June's probably your time to go here. Keep in mind that North Fork Sauk River is tucked much farther back in the mountains, so the flight season is probably a little bit later there anyway. So I'd say probably if you wanted to see Johnson's on the Mountain Loop Highway, I'd say mid to late June is when I would go to North Fork Sauk. And I'd say early to mid-June elsewhere. But once again, that is going to depend on the year. Remember, the first Johnson I saw was July 19th down on Monte Cristo. But that was an exceptionally late year.
Thank you.
If let's see, who asked that? Because I promised Cheryl that I would take her to see. Oh, John Bauman. Oh yeah, he definitely wants to see those. But I promised Cheryl I'd take her to North Fork Sauk and see him. All right, let's see. Any other questions? There we go. Potentially a new host plant for the Horikama. We got false azalea / fool's huckleberry. It's a rhododendron. It's a menziesea. I'm not sure what the current taxonomic tree is, but this is generally a species that we associate with ribes, with currants. But during 2023, we had an outbreak year of Horikamas, at least on the Mountain Loop Highway. They became one of the most common kamas, which usually the green kama holds that distinction, but they were all over the place in 2023. And I watched a female in clear oviposition behavior on this plant, and I found about 10 eggs. I kind of just noted the location. And as I came back to Lake 22, I went there and I found caterpillars, and I took 3 or 4 of them home. And I am just terrible at raising caterpillars. They're either wasps or I just kill them. I don't know why. So I never got them through to pupation, even though one of my friends who raises butterflies very, very well said, "Oh, commas are easy." I'm like, "Yeah, sure they are. Whatever you say." So inconclusive, just because they go to caterpillar stage that doesn't mean that adults come up, but looks like maybe Horikama's got some backup house plants for times of high density. Don't know, but that was definitely a cool observation. One of my other observations: no place is safe from the cabbage white. It took, I think, until 4 years for me to find my first cabbage white on the Mountain Loop Highway, and for those first 4 years, I thought, have I found the only place that doesn't have cabbage whites? The answer is no. And they weren't just on one trail. Maybe you'd expect them to be only down by the highway, right? Where they have an obvious dispersal corridor from the urban area. Just follow the highway. Nope. I found them in high mountain meadows. I found one on Mount Pew. I found one on North Fork Sauk River, way tucked away in the wilderness, 2 miles from the Chelan County border, just below the PCT, a female cabbage white. So no place is safe from the cabbage whites. And I mean, some people would argue that I've scratched deeper than the surface of the Mountain Loop Highway, but I still have so many questions. Like, for example, are Western whites resident on the Mountain Loop Highway, or is this kind of something similar to the Coronis fritillary that comes up and then leaves? Because I don't see spring forms on the Mountain Loop Highway, but then again, I only saw these at high elevation sites, so there might not even be a spring form. They might be single generation. And for years, I never saw any females. It was just hilltopping males. I thought, oh, these are just wandering males that find a hilltop and go. But then in 2022, I found this mating pair, and they seem pretty fresh. 2023, I saw 2 more females flying around. So that's still a question, that as far as my resident adjusted diversity index, where I take out the strays, I don't know if Western whites are, vagrants. I don't know if they're immigrants or not. Did they reside? Did they grow up here? Did they wander in? I don't know. I've only found 2 Oreus commas. I definitely thought when I was going to start this project, I'd find much more Oreus commas than I did. They're kind of known as a butterfly of the deep woods. Didn't find any on the North Fork Sauk River Trail, which I suspected among old growth they'd be much better, especially because their ribes host plants are everywhere out there. Didn't find any there, despite me looking for caterpillars too. So that's still a mystery. Of course, I was spending a lot of time up in subalpine meadows, which is not their habitat. So maybe I need to be comfortable with finding just margin whites for the day in my search for Oreus commas. So a lot more questions, but those are just some of the ones, for example. Might we actually...
David,
go on.
Where did you find the 2 Oreus?
One at the parking lot of the Lake 22 Trail, and one at the Monte Cristo town site. I was with Jerry Austin that day, and all 4 commas were flying together. And I remember lamenting about, oh, I've never seen an Oreus. I've never seen an Oreus. Look at all these commas. Surely there's one amongst. And I remember going, that one looked dark. And I tracked it, and boom, it was an Oreus.
Well done. Thank you.
So, but yeah, I mean, I know Tana gets scores of these over in the Olympics. And so it's just like, why are they not here? So who knows what we're looking at here? There were several species that I and others expected to find more commonly on the Mountain Loop Highway. So we already covered Bois de Val, above 4,000 feet, lush out subalpine meadows, lots of lupins. Why are there not Bois de Vals everywhere up here? Same with field crescents. Asters abound. They're one of the most common, they're one of the most popular nectar sources. Edith's checker spots. Those slopes are filled with paintbrush. Why do we not have Editha? And so Edith I only found once. I found 2 individuals on the top of Mount Pew, very, very top. I told you I only have 1 colony of Bois de Vals, and I only found 2 individual males on the very terminus of North Fork Sauk River. So could we be seeing maybe just the western limits of this species, like a climate kind of thing? Or could it be that the Sauk River and Stillaguamish River valleys, could they actually act as a significant dispersal barrier between between kind of these mountain chains that go from Lost Creek Ridge to Mount Pugh and the core of the Boulder River Wilderness. I don't have an answer for you on that, but that was just kind of interesting where it's like, I am surprised these three species in particular were not more common. Now I'm looking at the area that they're more east. I'm having this idea right now that maybe I should plot my trails from west to east and see if there's a correlation of like, no, just the further east you go, you get more butterflies, which for us Washington butterflies would not be any surprise, especially Cascades. You obviously go more west toward the Olympics and they can increase, but you get my point. Among the last things, I just want to talk about the people. I maybe dragged is a mean term, but I took so many people would talk about, I want to join you out there. It seems like you're seeing so many cool things. I'd love to see what you do, but I don't want to slow you down. Like, I'm counting butterflies. I'm slow anyway. Come with. I want to introduce you to this spot. So here's my sister and my brother-in-law and the little pup Miko. They joined me on a lot of these. So they were good company. And I just had various friends of friends, coworkers. They said, I want to go with you one day. Absolutely. So introducing people to the world of butterflies and my research was just an absolute delight. Special shout out to Jerry Austin. There is not one trail in this survey that he did not come with me. I do like my solitude, my solo hikes, but there's just something about seeing something amazing, wanting to share it, and then looking around, there's just nobody there. So special thanks to Jerry for just kind of being a consistent field companion out there. And he just kind of made the trails a little less lonely. So thank you, Jerry, for doing that. This is him at the top of Mount Pugh. So he climbed 5,200 feet. So maybe so can you? I don't know. Anyway. And then just speaking of people, I definitely encountered a lot of people out there who, you carry a 5-foot butterfly net, you get asked questions. And people were shocked when I told them, oh yeah, 48 species. Like, I thought there was 2 out here. And so that did inspire me to maybe make a little bit of a display collection. So I donated this display collection of the common butterflies of the Mountain Loop Highway. I've only seen 2 sylvan hair streaks. I'm not going to collect those and waste space in there. I'm not collecting Johnson's hair streaks. They're at least not for this. They're a little rare, et cetera, et cetera. But so I donated this to the Forest Service to be displayed in the visitor center. I don't know if they're displaying this in the Verlot Visitor Center or the Darrington Visitor Center, but maybe you can catch an eye on this and go, I know that guy. But I kind of thought there might be a need for people visiting to look at this display and go, I didn't know there were so many butterflies out here. Maybe I should keep a lookout when I go hiking. And I got this little corner for diurnal moths that could be mistaken for butterflies. So things like forester moths, tiger moths, all these kind of the mesoleucas, the rhumapteras, et cetera, et cetera. So what about the moths? A lot of you know me as a moth guy. I'm not going to go out to this big area and not light trap. So once again, there's Jerry. Currently, I have 163 species of moths recorded from the Mountain Loop Highway, way more than the 48. But this is just off of very light and very inconsistent sampling. I'd love to do a lot more stuff out there, but I only have so much time in the day or night. But you get my point. So this is no doubt a gross underestimate. I'd love to do more backpacking up at the high elevations and do some sampling. But yeah, easily there's hundreds of species out there. But that was a fun way to spend my time. Now we mentioned the bumblebees. I did kind of keep track. I say kind of because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff missing here. I mean, you can see that Melanopigus and Sicensis dominated out there. Those were the 2 most common. And I really think, come on, Monte Cristo, Sicensis is the only one. Melanopigus is there. I just wasn't paying enough attention. So I should go rectify that. Flavidus was also fairly common. That's one of the cuckoo bumblebees. Flavifrons was also fairly widespread. Vosnesensky, I was near absent. And Mixtus, I only got 1 Mixtus, and that was at the very terminus of the North Fork Sauk River. So Mixtus is not really a mountain bumblebee. It's more of a lowland one. And so but they are more common in Eastern Washington. So once again, this was kind of the spillover effect from the Cascades into Western Washington. Bifarius is interesting. I may have seen it, but we don't have the orange banded variety that's a lot more that's a lot more diagnostic. We have a yellow and black version that kind of looks like flavifrons or some of the other ones out here. So I may have seen it on Lost Creek Ridge or Mount Pew, but I never really caught it and got a good look. Then picture of flavifrons, you can see the little mites on it. But so bumblebees are something I was very happy to kind of finally get a chance to learn and study. No Occidentalis yet. I definitely looked. And so with that, onward to the next project. And to which I've definitely harped on at the end of all of these presentations I've given you. Please, there are so many of these places, whether it's a state park, wildlife refuge, you don't need to survey a big area for you to contribute to our knowledge. There's tons of places that just don't have the funding for taxonomists like us, for naturalists like us. So there's a lot of places where you are going to find new colonies, new nectar records, new host plants, new behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. So what's your next project is the next question. So with that, I'll take some questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much, David. This is just really a marvelous first look at such a great project. I did want to mention that Jerry chimed in and said that the butterfly display is in Darrington.
I just saw that.
Yeah,
Good.
those of you who may want to see that. So this is our time for open discussion, open questions. So please pile in. And I know Jonathan wanted to say a few things. Jonathan, are you there?
Yeah. A great presentation. I love that whole conversation about abundance and diversity. There's a big story behind that. I won't bore everybody with it now. It's kind of cool. But so as for Celestrina and Mountain Ash, I have seen that at association widely. I've never recovered larvae off of the flowers. There's no reason to expect they couldn't use it. They are flower and fruit feeders, and they're rosaceous feeders, so that'll work. We just haven't got that observation. As for Polygonia,
I was gonna say, don't make me climb up Lost Creek Ridge again.
why not? I mean, better use it. So,
anyway, Polygonia, go for it.
Okay, so what was that you recorded on? You had an issue with the azalea versus rhododendron. What was the species name?
Ferruginea, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Okay, so that's we have only recorded rhododendron according to current taxonomy, albiflorum. All right.
Yeah, and that was for faunus, right?
No, for gracilis for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But so yours is, I mean, you reared it. That's good enough for me. I'm gonna list that one. That's really great. Thank you.
Not to adulthood, man.
Well, you know what they look like, and it's on that plant. It was nothing else, right? You took a picture.
That was the photo I took. Was the adults?
There you go.
I mean, not the adults, the larva. I'll just zoom back there. There you go.
Yeah, but that looks like a mature larva to me. That doesn't look like an early instar.
No.
Oh no, it's not an early. That was like
exactly
L3 or L4.
It's definitely not faunus. It's not. That's the only other one thing that would be using rhododendron size. And then regarding Pontia occidentalis, all our observations reflect yours, except with the one small detail, and that is we will get at places like Slate Peak. We'll get early spring forms, like early in the season, just about the same time. Mossii and Sheridan and I are flying along the lower road. You get to the peak, you'll find the early spring forms. But within 2 weeks, you've got these brand spanking things coming up from below. If you don't get a spring form, they're probably not breeding up there. They're probably coming from below. But that is a butterfly that's quite capable of doing that.
Yep.
All right.
It's just one of those things that until I find a spring form or until I find larvae out there, it's like, I don't know how to classify this thing. Is it a resident? Is it not?
Well, if you don't see spring forms, it's probably not resident, because if they're breeding up there as high as you're at, that spring form is inevitable. I mean, that's an Archipiro show that in a photoperiod temperature, lead directly to the phenological form, that spring form. There's almost no way you can be up there and not, you survive as a spring form.
Now I imagine that the time that they have up there only allows for one brood though, right? So as far as spring and summer form.
Well, the summer forms, they're coming up. Okay, so like anything you get there that isn't
Okay.
they're moving in. So that is a butterfly that has that tradition. They're like that. I mean, they get into Western Washington, for heaven's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Vanessa, Annabella, and possibly some others. Maybe your Juba, David, that can turn up in any given place, like your great history, any given place in the whole state. But they're resident in some places.
Yep. So it's just like I saw this mating pair, and I'd love to maybe see a female laying. The two females I saw, I was definitely following for a little bit, going like, show me where your host is, something like that. Show me you're laying eggs out here. I'm kind of wondering.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering if it was maybe something similar like Coronis, where it's like they fly up here, breed up here, and then they might descend eastward. But that's just a wild guess.
Well, but like you say, they're both fresh in that picture.
They're very fresh in that picture, exactly.
So I'm not at all sure they're not resident. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So you might
true.
Perhaps you just have not found the spring form yet.
And they weren't, and Occidentalis certainly was not common. So that was another problem. It's like if they were common, I'd have more opportunities. But it was one of those things that I might find a handful of males a day along a ridge, kind of thing. I saw 3 females the entire project. So it's just, not many opportunities.
So Dawn, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
So yes, you said the Forest Service wants to do some restoration up there, but these restoration projects often don't have a good goal in mind. So my question is, what's the limiting factor up there, larval plants or nectar plants? I could see the Forest Service getting a donation of a lot of heather plants, but that's not really what they're looking for.
Well, not for the butterflies, but let's say if you're trying to plant for Occidentalis, heather's great. So this just kind of gives them an idea as far as they called it, the person I talked to called it pollinators. So it would probably be something of a more holistic, like, what do bumblebees use? What do butterflies use based on this research, based on this data? And kind of the idea was they have a number of places out on the Mountain Loop Highway, particularly lower, where timber is grown. So it's kind of the whole like, okay, well, what do we put in its place once the clear cut is made? And this would give them some ideas of what to put.
But again, what are they going to target? Are they just going to throw plants in there? Or are they going to target bees or butterflies?
Like I said, so they said pollinators. So I imagine they're going to kind of target both. And with a landscape as big as a clear cut, I imagine you might have enough room to, throw both in there. And it would depend obviously on elevation, because I'm not sure heather can go too low, but yeah, I don't know specifics. I think it's one of those like dreams they have, and maybe they'll start to get a concrete plan if funding ever comes back.
Okay, thanks. Really enjoyed.
Yeah, sorry I don't have any definite answers for you on that, but yeah, they just kind of said pollinator restoration.
So Jared, do you want to unmute as well and talk about your new record?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Jerry, you have a new record? Oh,
no,
yeah, you do.
No. Yeah, 2023 summer, I saw a field crescent up on the trail of the Monte Cristo.
Oh, you told me about that. You did.
More generally, I'm just wondering if you're interested in any new records people might find in your area.
Yes, always. So kind of the next step now is, while it's not officially part of the project, there are more than 11 trails on the Mountain Loop Highway. And so now the fun part's this all been the fun part, but now an interesting part will be to maybe visit those trails that I chose not to go to and see, well, what's there. And I chose not to go there for various reasons, whether it was, habitat, or maybe it was redundant. It kind of seemed redundant with another place I had. So for example, right next door to Lake 22 is Beaver Lake. And the habitat's much the same, not entirely the same, but much the same. So I kind of imagined that I'd end up just getting kind of a bunch of repeats and redundant data. But it'd be interesting then to go back to Heather Lake now and see, like, well, how wrong was I? So yeah, always interested in new stuff from the Mount Loop Highway. Always. This is going to be one of those things that while I might write a report, I'm probably going to be revisiting this spot for the rest of my life.
Okay, thanks.
So David, I've got a suggestion for some of your next projects.
Well, I already got one, so
I'm sure you do, and I hope you're going to tell us about it. But Pelham and I would agree that one of the greatest gifts you could give to humanity would be to figure out what is the deal with common wood nymphs and common ringlets in Snohomish County, and why can't we find them there?
I was just going to say, what common ringlets, what common wood nymphs?
Exactly.
Oh, there were some grassy spots. There were some grassy spots along the Mount Loop Highway, but just they weren't there.
Both John and I have looked in a lot of places in Snohomish County, and it's in adjacent counties, And
it is.
Oh yeah, the ringlet it's there in King County, and the ringlet goes farther north in San Juan County, and there are records here and there. I mean, there's a common wood nymph record up at the Skagit Whatcom County line up on Slate Peak. So
yeah, but how old is that?
I mean the Okanagan Whatcom County. So I mean, Snohomish County has a lot of apparent habitat for both ringlets and wood nymphs, and they just ain't frogging there that we can find. So you've done an absolutely superb job here. This was a great program, by the way. Really nicely done and wonderful graphics. Just a beautiful job, David. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I want you to go and solve this other one for us.
Well, one of the things I do want to do, so we mentioned a few of them, like the field crescents, Bois blues, Edith checker spots, etc. Mountain Parnassians. I've looked at records on iNaturalist for butterflies up at White Pass, just below Glacier Peak. So if I continued on the North Fork Sauk Trail and climbed up to Glacier Pass, White Pass, I mean, you look at some of the images of those meadows, and it looks like a butterfly's dream.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to do some backpacking up there. And there's several photos from iNaturalist of like Bois blues up there. So like, okay, like they're up there. I'm sure field crescents are up there, et cetera, et cetera. So it'd be interesting to kind of go up there and once again, just expand a little bit east, kind of get a little bit more data as far as that east spilling into west. And maybe I'll find something else up there.
Yeah, go get them.
I ain't done yet out here. It's just a matter of like, for the purposes I started, I'm done. But now there's all these other questions that are popping up.
Very good.
So Allison, do you want to unmute?
Sure. I'm kind of in the dark here. Yeah, I just wanted to say common wood nymphs is what I mean, that I've seen them both at my house in Port Townsend, and I've seen them in Quilcene. And kind of interestingly, Quilcene also has the western bumblebees. They've got this community garden that's a mix of native and just pretty flowers and vegetables. And it has so many things in it. I mean, in the bumblebee world, but also butterfly world.
Now, remind me, Quilcene, is that on the west slope or the east slope of the Olympics?
East. So it's along 101.
East, okay.
Yeah, it's before, just a little bit before 101 goes into 104. Or those.
Is that something? Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's just kind of southeast of where 101 and 104 come together.
Okay. Because that's something we do see a lot in the Olympics, is the Olympics kind of have like a little mini Cascades effect where the east side is drier And so we do
Yeah.
get species to higher abundance there, kind of like you'd see in on the east slopes of the Cascades. Got that rain shadow effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if wood nymphs can survive there, but I don't know about wood nymphs on the west side of the Cascades of the Olympics. So I'm wondering if there's just, once again, it's just kind of at the Snohomish County is just at the brunt of all of this rain and cold, and the wood nymphs forget that. I'll take the rain shadow side.
David, they used to occur only east of the 80-inch per year isocline in Wahkiakum County. And then way back in the late 80s, some 4-H kids I was working with found them found one west of that line. And now they're a common butterfly at my yard with 120 inches of rain. And I found Grays Harbor County record quite near the northern end of Willapa Bay and the Pacific Ocean, out there where it's probably a little more rain than here. So I no longer think that's the case. I used to think that was it too. Thought it was limited, but that butterfly seems to occur in some very, very wet areas.
Interesting.
I just ain't no sense in it not showing up in Snohomish.
Yeah. No, I'll keep looking. I'm not going to keep that a secret if I find it.
They're super common in the Willamette Valley, but then you're getting into some warmer.
Yeah, but that's desert.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to let you get away after you mentioned that you also are doing moths without asking a moth question, because of course that's where my strengths lie. And so
I'd be upset if someone didn't.
Yeah, well, there's two things I have to one statement and one question. And the statement is, if you're looking for more projects, if you start a moth project, it never ends. So
never ends.
There's that. But the second thing is, you mentioned finding 160 some species, which of course is just a start. Did you find anything that you would consider outstanding? Any interesting noctuids or anything?
I'll send you the list, because I know that Lars Crabo got really excited about some of my records.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I
can't remember any off the top of my head.
Yeah, I talk with Lars from time to time, so that would be good.
Yep. I'd be happy to send you the list.
Excellent.
And then everyone has my email. If you want a copy of this report, like I said, it's over 200 pages, but it's a lot of pretty pictures. So there's that. Might give you a reason to come visit the Mountain Loop Highway. But like I said, now this is done, I'm looking forward to seeing you all a lot more in the field, whether that's on a WABA field trip or I come to your neck of the woods and see some relatively common butterflies in Washington that I haven't seen for years.
So is your report, presumably it's going to the U.S. Forest Service, is it being disseminated more widely as well, David? Or do you know what the plan is for it?
Well, so the plan is obviously final just goes to the Forest Service. So every year I update the report and it goes to the Forest Service. And then I send it off to people who I consider friends and mentors. And anyone who wants it can get it. Eventually, I want to, publish it in maybe Lepsoc Journal and just kind of here's a summary of this poorly sampled area, what I found. I'm kind of using Caitlin's Sinlahican paper as kind of a guide as far as what might be important to put in.
I would strongly urge you to pursue that for paper
it's a plan.
Yeah, that's good.
David. Okay, first of all, Sinlahican's Caitlin Sinlahican is a book, so don't bite too much off all at one time, right?
Oh no. I'm talking her Lepsoc article.
Oh, okay. Second of all, I have to tell you that it's really been my pleasure to look over your shoulder as you first began this project, and then as you continued it. And you know how excited I am about anybody going places where the people haven't gone before, right? Not just like Star Trek, but the whole thing about that is it's been so rich, and despite the fact that you've had so many intensive activities in Snohomish County, we still haven't recorded a ringlet. Now, Cercionis, the wood nymph, I can see that, whatever, it doesn't occur north. It's rare in King County. Okay, fine. But the ringlets, man, you just have to go over to Whidbey Island and all the way up to San Juan
Yep.
Islands.
Yep.
There's
from that image there on a clear day, you could probably see across to Whidbey and go, they're right over there.
Yeah, they're right over there. So what you gonna do?
Well, if I go to Whidbey County, I won't record them in Snohomish County, so I can't do that. But I mean, look at all those clear cuts in that picture. Look at all that butterfly habitat coming into prime.
But the ringwood is a great colonizer along roads.
Yep.
You find it along I-5 here and there in
That is. Go on. Sorry.
No, that's all. And so it's just almost uncanny that it hasn't turned up. I mean, Layton didn't find it in Snohomish County. Pelham didn't. I didn't. Other people have looked. It just.
Nicolay.
What's that?
Nicolay.
Nicolay, going way back. It just ought to be there. So
that is one thing I did not spend enough time. I wish I would have spent more time was hanging out down on the highway. So like that whole unofficial survey thing, just taking a drive and stopping off at roadside sites along the highway. I would like to do more of that in the future. Yeah, I might surprise you.
It won't be as exciting as being up in the high alpine ridges, for sure.
Well, that's why I spent most of the time up there, because that's where all like the uncommon stuff was.
These days, I spend a lot of time in the lowlands along the edges of roads. And, there are some nice surprises there sometimes.
Sure.
Well, David, if you're looking for new butterflies to come see, just come visit me in Georgia. So,
So, I thought the Pacific Northwest is all I ever needed. And then my buddy Matt said, hey, you want to go monsoon mothing in Arizona?
Oh, yeah.
And I saw all these butterflies there that I thought would only ever exist in field guides for me. So yeah, ditto. All of a sudden, like, great, Matt, you've now awoken like the guy who wants to go traveling now. Great, thanks a lot.
Well, the LEPSOC meeting is in Sierra Vista, Arizona this end of July, early August this year. So you should make a point to come down, rub elbows with some of us, and go out in the field.
We will see what I can do. But James, you got my email, right? Or I can find yours.
Yeah, I know Paulette has mine if nobody else does. So and Bob has mine and John has mine, and
here you go. For anyone wanting a copy of the report, there's my email in the chat.
Oh, that's it. That's super easy. Super easy. Okay.
If there's no other questions, I'll let you all enjoy your night, and butterfly season's a coming.
Yeah, it's definitely started. We were talking, about the things people have seen. I think Melanie said she's seen a few things, and so it's starting. So thank you so much, David. Just such a wonderful project. So thrilled that you're you're finishing up the field work, and it's really fun to see the first results that you have. So thank you for sharing it with me.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say our next program is April, and that's going to be Julie O'Donnell talking about pollinator gardens. She's expanded her scope, and I think that will be really interesting too. So thank you very much, and hope to see you next month. Thank you, David.
Excellent.
Good to see you, David. Good to see everybody.
Okay. Good night.
Cheers, drop man.